I'm gonna try to be quiet because my dad is sleeping, but I just finished the crash, and let's just say I'm just taken aback. I really don't feel like recording this, but I want to hurry up. I want to start reading the next book I have, so I'm just gonna try to. So, I don't know where I left off at, but Polly called like the pharmacy or whatever and like asked for antibiotics and some other medicine to give Tegan, right? So when she like impersonated her, I don't know if she impersonated a doctor she used to work with or something, but she impersonated somebody in order to get the prescriptions. So once they had it ready, I guess she left to go get it. And so once she left, it looks like Hank came back from work. So he came back and he took Tegan, because that was the only shot he had since Polly was gone. He took Tegan and he took her to the hospital. So while he's doing all of that, Tegan is totally freaking out. She's like, "What are you doing? Put me down. I don't want to go." Da, 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 da. Because she still thinks that Hank is a bad person. So she's like, "Where are we going?" He's like, "To the hospital." She's like, "Stop lying to me." He's like, "The hospital." So, yeah, half that trip was just Tegan not trusting Hank. And then once they finally make it to the hospital, she's like, "Oh, okay." So Hank tells her, he basically tries to defend Polly's image because he knows that Tegan's gonna go in there and snitch. So he basically tries to defend Polly's image, and he's just like, "She's a good person. She's a good nurse. If you had met her in this hospital, you would have thought that she was a great nurse, blah, blah, blah. And she just had a moment of weakness with, her miscarriages or her infertility or whatever she had going on." So he's like, "Yeah, she just had a moment of weakness, blah, blah, blah." And so after that, I think Tegan passed out or something, but she got transported into the hospital. I don't know if Hank brought her in there or if people came out, but whatever. So Polly came back home and she realized that nobody was there. Hank wasn't there. She seen her door was unlocked or something, but she was like, "Why would Hank come home early?" So she realizes that they're both gone. So I think Hank comes back home and Polly is still there. So he's now tripping because he's thinking, remember I told you Polly threatened to unalive herself if, Hank took T into the hospital. So he was fully expecting that, but Polly like wasn't doing it. So she went like back up to their bedroom or something, and Hank was just like trying to keep an eye on her. So he would call on her every few minutes or whatever and check on her, and then she'll respond, because if she doesn't, then he'll assume that she did something. So I guess he like kind of safety proofed the house, so took like any possible weapons. Eventually Hank left to go chop some wood or something. So that's when Polly took this opportunity to go through with her little plan that she conjured up. So she got into her nursing outfit, like scrubs that she had from when she used to be a nurse, and she put on her little name tag and her surgical mask and all that, and she left the bedroom. Um, Maybe it was in the office, whatever, but she went downstairs or whatever the flip their layout of the house is, and she got like a pair of scissors. So Hank did everything. He took like every possible weapon, but he didn't take no knives out the freaking kitchen. So she took some like shears or something. I guess they're like scissors, and she left. So she was able to do all of this because Hank was out in the backyard chopping wood, so he didn't notice. So she got in her car and she went to the hospital. So she had this planned out to a T. She obviously used to be a nurse, so she knew that around whatever time she left, the nurses would be like busy doing a bunch of other stuff. I guess like switching shifts. So like they would be like the evening shift and the morning shift, and the people, however that worked. So she was like, it's approximately 30 minutes of chaos, and nobody's gonna like question her and why she's there. So she was able to get into the hospital, and she was able to, you know, get in there perfectly fine. And I just realized that I missed a whole bunch. So let me read back. So that's Polly and Hank. That's what happened with Polly and Hank. So during that whole thing, cause they kept flipping between Polly and Tegan's POV. So now Tegan's POV was that she woke up. Cause remember she passed out or whatever in Hank's car. So she woke up in the hospital bed, and her brother was there. So her brother was there. You know, they're reuniting. Blah blah blah. And I think a few minutes or so later, Jackson comes. Don't ask me how Jackson knew that she was in the hospital, but Jackson was there. So Jackson's like really trying to tell her something, and she's too like upset with him to even listen to him because of, you know, what he did back at home about not believing her story and all that. So Dennis tells Jackson to get out. Now the weird thing was, it seems as though Dennis and Jackson knew each other, because when Dennis told Jackson to leave the room, he called Jackson by his name, and Tegan found that weird because she thought that they didn't know each other. So that was weird to her. But yeah. So Jackson ended up leaving with no hesitation. He just left, and he said that he was going to come back in the morning. So that was pretty much all that was. Dennis, like I said, Dennis and Tegan were just catching up or whatever they were talking about. So now this is where things kind of intersect. So once Polly makes it to the hospital, she goes to. She basically finds Tegan's room. She finds Tegan's room, and when she gets there, she sees someone in the room. Mind you, I didn't even say it, but Polly's plan, I guess, was to Tegan so she doesn't snitch. So that's the whole reason of her even being there. But she got there and she found somebody in Tegan's room while Tegan was asleep. The person that was in her room was Dennis. So Dennis was still in Tegan's room. And so he had a syringe in his head and he in his hand, and he was like standing by her bed or something. And so long story short, he was trying to inject methamine or something. I don't know what it's called. He was trying to inject something into Tegan's like IV. I don't know these terms, but it was something that was connected to her. He was trying to put it inside of that so it goes into her body. So he's trying to do that, and Tegan caught him. Polly caught him. Now this is where Polly had like conflict because she was like, I came here to get rid of Tegan, but you're also trying to get rid of Tegan. So do I just let you do it, or do I have her back? So she decided to interfere, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And since she had like a mask on, 'cause remember they met before. Dennis had came to Polly's door about Tegan, so they've met before, and Polly noticed him, but he didn't notice her because she had a face mask on. So she was like, "What are you doing?" And then he didn't respond. He was like, "Oh, is visiting hours over?" And she was like, "No, what are you doing?" So instead of answering, he like ran and he like pushed past her or something. So since she's a nurse or looks like a nurse, she tells him, "Oh, stop that man, stop that man." So Dennis ran into Jackson. I don't know why Jackson was still there, but I think he was waiting on the elevator or something, so he was trying to leave. So Dennis ran into Jackson. And like I said, Dennis and Jackson looked like they knew each other. So I think Jackson knew that that was Dennis and he put him in a headlock or something. That's what they described it as. I think it was a headlock. So fast forward a little bit, and basically, so I think they like, take Dennis or something. And I don't know if it was the next day or what, but Jackson was there again with a cop or something. But I'm not even trying to tell y'all the story. I'm just going to tell y'all what happened. So the whole back scheme thing was that somebody tampered with Tegan's car. The person who tampered with her car is the reason why she, you know, had the car troubles, and that's why her brakes weren't working or whatever the heck her problem was. So the person who tampered with her car was Simon. But that's not. I think that's what Jackson was trying to tell her on the phone, like before she got in a crash. I'm not sure, I forgot. But Simon was the one who called or set up somebody to tamper with Tegan's car. So that was the reason why her whole thing went off the rails. And so turns out that the reason why Dennis was trying to get rid of her was because Dennis and Simon or Lamar knew each other. So Dennis and Lamar knew each other because I'm not really sure how. I think it was like Lamar was gonna like help Simon with his, I mean, help Dennis with his ski resorts, and they had this whole little deal going. But once the thing with Lamar and Tegan happened, it was like, mm. So basically, long story short, they had a deal, but since Lamar sexually assaulted Tegan, and Tegan didn't take the hush money, she was able to tell the police about what he did. And so if she was able to do that, then the deal between Dennis and Lamar was gonna be off. I said Lamar, but his name is Lamar Simon or something. I don't know, Simon Lamar. So once Dennis realized that, you know, nothing happened to Tegan and she's still not gonna take that money, he was like, I gotta take matters in my own hands. Because he said his initial plan was to harm Tegan enough for her to be like, okay, maybe I should take, Lamar upon his offer. And then Dennis and Lamar's little deal would be safe. But since she was so adamant on not taking that money, he was like, the only other way for this deal to not go down the drain is to get rid of her. So crazy how your day one switch up on you like that. But that was that whole thing. And so Simon and Lamar, I mean, not Simon, Lamar and Dennis both went to jail. And so Jackson apologized for not believing Tegan and all that, and he wanted to make things right with her. Switch back to Polly. So Polly, I don't know where she was during all that. I think she just left after Dennis got arrested, or after they, got Dennis up out of there. So she just left. But by that point, by the time she left the hospital, Hank realized that she was gone, and, came to the hospital because he figured that's where she would be at. So he sees sees Polly in the parking lot, I guess, and he approaches her. They get in the car. They have their little sentimental moment, and she realizes that in order to have a complete family, you don't need a kid. She realizes that Hank loves her, through thick and thin. Like, they just have this moment, right? So they go back home. Once they get home, they see a bunch of flashing cop cars, but the cop cars weren't at their house. They were at their neighbor's house, Mitch and Sadie. So she immediately gets out the car, because y'all know how she feel about Sadie. She immediately gets to the house, and long story short, Mitch died from suffocating in the snow. And then the cops was like, "Oh, Sadie's okay, so she's okay." So they just went home peacefully. So that was that. That was the end of their story. And then Tegan successfully had her kid. Jackson was with her for all the days that she was in the hospital, and that was the end of her story. Happy endings. She never ended up telling the cops about Hank and Polly, because she kept feeling like they're the reason why she's in the hospital, even though I disagree, because Hank's the reason why you're in the hospital both ways. Like, if Polly had not tried to keep you captive, then he would have took you to the hospital the next day. He just couldn't do it that day because of the snow, but he would have done it eventually. And the only reason, and then even if Polly was in the equation, Hank is still the only reason why you're in the hospital now, because he took the risk of taking you to the hospital once Polly left. So both times, Hank was the reason why you're in the hospital, not Polly, but whatever. So that was the end of their story, and now you have the epilogue, right? So the epilogue is a year later. A year later, Tian's foot healed, or her ankle heals for the most part. She limps, but she can walk. So she didn't have to cut her foot off or nothing, thank God, because it was really infected, like really bad. But everything went well. So she had her baby. I guess the baby's like a year old at this point, and she lives in like this 3-bedroom town's home or whatever she called it. And Jackson was there the whole time, that whole year, not living with them, but very what do you call it, involved. So he was helping build things for a little. She named her baby Tia Marie Warner, whatever her last name was, but Tia Marie. Beautiful name. So yeah, so he was helping around the house, and he helped her get the house, and he helped pay for things. He was helpful, and that's pretty much all there was to it. So toward the end of her epilogue, they basically talk about a potential relationship. I guess he didn't make a move on her for the past year out of respect, But then he was like, how would you feel if somebody made a move on you at this point? And she was like, I wouldn't mind it. And so that kind of gives him the okay to try to pursue a relationship with her. So we can only assume that they have a good relationship and they, get together and all that. So good stuff with them. Polly's epilogue is that no, yeah, Polly's epilogue is that they adopt Sadie, or they trying to adopt Sadie, but Sadie currently lives with Polly and Hank. So her whole epilogue wasn't really much. They just talked about her routine with Sadie, and then how she reads Sadie a bedtime story, and then that was pretty much that was the whole epilogue for Polly. It was just regarding Sadie. So at the end of her epilogue, Sadie wants her to read like one more chapter of whatever book they're reading, Matilda or something. And then Hank comes in and he's like, I'll read it to her. And then they close her epilogue like that. They kiss and she leaves the room and Hank goes in the room. So Polly and Hank's epilogues kind of tied to each other. So once that one ended, Hank's started with him being in the room and Polly leaving the room. So now that Hank's in the room and we're looking at his epilogue, he's a great father. Everything's well. He has a secret. The secret is that Mitch, so Sadie's father. So the cops ruled it as him suffocating in the snow or whatever, but in reality, it was I forgot what it was. I think Hank, on his way to the hospital to go find Polly, he stopped at their house, at Mitch and Sadie's house for some reason. And so when he opened the door, he seen that Mitch was like really drunk and all that, and then he noticed that Sadie had like bruises or something. So he handled that, to say the least. He handled that. I think he like pushed him in the snow or something, and then told Sadie to go in the house. And he was initially gonna leave, but then he realized that he already aggravated Mitch. So if he lets Mitch walk, then he's probably gonna go back in the house and abuse Sadie. So he just finished the job with Mitch, and since Mitch was already drunk, the cops were probably just gonna rule it as, him suffocating. So that was the secret that both Hank and Sadie knew. Polly don't even know about that. So he wonders if Sadie hates him a little bit for it, even though they have a good relationship. He wonders if she kind of feels resentment towards him for that. But she doesn't. She 100% like understood where he was coming from when he did that. So that's how his epilogue ended, and that was pretty much the end. Oh, I forgot to say, but yeah, everybody had a secret except Polly. Ironically, like she had the biggest issue, and she the only one that wasn't keeping secrets from nobody. But Polly doesn't know that Hank and Sadie know about how Mitch died, and then for Tegan and Jackson, Jackson doesn't know anything about what Tegan went through. She hadn't told the cops. She hasn't told Jackson. Literally nobody knows where Tegan just popped up from 4 days later after her crash. So she didn't tell nobody about that. But anyways, that's the end of Freida McFadden, The Crash. That's the end. I teared up, did you? But yeah, I really like this book. So the next book I'm gonna read is The Boyfriend. And they have the prologue in the back, but I'm not gonna read it because I'm pretty sure it's also in the book that I already have. So I'm gonna just read it whenever I read the book. But I'm so geeked for that one because every time it's in on my dresser, so every time I go to my dresser, I look at it and it look at me. So I'm ready to open it up, bust it down. But yeah, so I'm not doing this again. I won't be doing this for the next book, and any book after that could just drain me. But thank you for being here for these 4 parts. Bye.